But I say to you that hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. To him who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also, and from him who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and of him who takes away your goods, do not ask them again. And as you wish that men would do to you, do so to them. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies. And do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. And your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the selfish. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put back into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. May God bless his understanding of his word. You might be wondering, what's with the couch? It's coffee time with Cindy. Yay! Or in Cindy's case, it's Diet Coke time.
Yeah. So I already apologized to our visitors because I'm like, this is not the normal sermon. And so, grace. And so I might have a couple more people who do not like me after this sermon. I don't know. But so today what we're going to talk about is loving those who do not like me. So when we think about, just individuals, sometimes our perception, clouds and makes that decision. So as it's obvious, I'm a Coke drinker. So what about those Pepsi drinkers? Who likes Pepsi out there? Oh, it's so sweet. And so I'm kind of like, it's not that I don't like you, but I don't know that I like your choices. Yeah. And so Diana and I also had a conversation in regards to toilet paper.
There's a correct way to put it on the roll. There definitely is.
There is.
Beard.
Mullet. Okay, so mullet.
Beard,
no, beard.
over the front. Thank you.
No. Over?
Over. Yeah. Told you.
All right, so my husband and I have different opinions. And so I will tell you that sometimes I do not like him when I go into the bathroom and it is beard. And so because I use most of the toilet paper, I have that opportunity to put it the way I want it, as mullet. But things like that can really make a difference. You think about those small actions and how after 40 plus years of living with my husband, how sometimes those can turn into that I don't like him. But so today we're going to talk about how we can love those individuals who may not like us and that we may not like them. So Diane is going to start us off.
Okay, I like to tell the tale about a small town that had historically been dry. So you know what that means, no alcohol served. Yeah, I know. But then a local businessman decided he would build a tavern. And he happened to acquire the land immediately next to a church. So he made known his plans. He was building a tavern. They would be serving alcohol, carousing, who knows what. And the church members were appalled. So the tavern was built, and it was getting ready to open. And the church members all went to church, and they had a prayer vigil. They prayed all through the night. And while they were praying, a mighty storm came, a thunderstorm came, and lightning struck the tavern, caught on fire, it burned to the ground. Well, the tavern owner was suing the church they caused the church or the tavern to burn down. And the church people are like, no, we didn't. No, that's a frivolous lawsuit. And the judge read the paperwork and he says, well, I know one thing for sure before we even talk about this case. The tavern owner believes in the power of prayer. The church people don't. Prayer is important. It's powerful. It is something that changes us. Now, I don't know how you view prayer or how you pray. I don't know. You know what? It doesn't matter to me. I know how I pray and what I do. And sometimes it isn't a question of praying for something like Santa Claus, like, ooh, I really want this. And it isn't about hoping for divine intervention to get me out of a speeding ticket. Not that I speed. I'm saying this for Randy because he's been caught once or twice. But it isn't about that. Praying is a personal thing that changes you. It changes your heart. There's a story about a village in Africa that Christianity came to, and man, they were very, very adamant that prayer was part of everyone's spiritual development. So in this little village, everyone sought a special prayer space, like a prayer room, but they'd go into the jungle, and then they'd say their prayers, and then come back. And you could tell little paths would go out of the village where everyone went to their special place to pray. And on occasion, to gently remind people the importance of prayer, they might say something like, "Dear friend, I noticed there's grass on your path." Prayer is powerful. And if we can remember who people are, if we can pray for them, even those who do not like me, that changes a lot of things. So that first note, how we love people who do not like us, we need to pray for them. And it can't be, please God, let them like me. It has to be praying for goodness, good things in their lives, praying that they have joy, that they have a community of support, that they have love, they have peace. That's a great way. And when you pray for someone like that, it changes you. And who knows, maybe one small thing I do for someone, they'll do for someone else too.
Okay, the next thing, and we're going to go to the note first, is that we're going to show kindness. So as Christians, we're called to love universally, without boundaries, to be intentional. So to choose to act with kindness against or for those that don't like us is something that is our second item. So my mom has been gone now for 13, 14 years. But she, if you knew her, you knew her. She was a very spirit, so she was wonderful. But she used to always tell me is that for those people who don't like you, kill them with kindness. And I was like, oh, thanks, Mom, but kill them with kindness. But then she always said, and give them a big hug. I'm like, oh, all right. Well, there's a second part to that. So she used to say, you give them a big hug, so this tells you how big a hole you need to dig for them. So it wasn't necessarily the nice kindness that she was killing them with. But so if you knew my mom, you would understand. But truly, the intention was to be nice to everyone. If you talk to my daughter, Anna, it was like, I would always tell her she had to be nice to everyone, even those who did not like her. So we all know how much easier it is to be nice to those people that like us. I want my friends to be happy. I want them to be blessed. So I'm not necessarily the best example to sit up here and say that I'm always kind to those who do not like me. I read a lot of John Maxwell, and so John Maxwell is a well-known author. He was a pastor. He always talks about responding, in his leadership teachings, to respond with kindness instead of retaliation. That responding in kindness is strength. it's leadership. It should not be seen as weaknesses. So, when you think about fight or flight, when you get in a situation, it's like either you're going to fight or you're going to run away. So Diane shared this with me, that she just listened to a podcast, and it's similar to that fight or flight. But hers, this podcaster said that when you're put in that situation, you have that choice. You can either be kind, or excuse my language, you can be a dick. So with that, that's the reality. When you're put in that situation, you have a choice. So as a reminder, of what our actions can do, how we respond, whether we're going to respond in kind or the other way, I want to remind you, and I'm sure all of you have heard this story, so it's not anything new, but this is a story about Kyle. And so Kyle was a high school student, just, that freshman going in there, and he had transferred from another school, and so he didn't have friends. There were a lot of people, not necessarily that did not like him, but they didn't like him because they didn't know him. So this Friday after school, we see Kyle walking out of the school, and he has all of his books in his arms. He has everything out of his locker, and he's taking them home. So another student sees this and is like, he must really be a nerd, he doesn't have any weekend plans, he's just going to study all night. Well, what happened is that Kyle dropped these books. This other student seeing this made that decision, even though he did not necessarily like him, he wasn't his friend, to go help Kyle with those books. So this individual reached out, helped him pick up all his books. And Kyle was like, thank you very much. So Monday came, Kyle came back with all his books into school, and the same kid was like, hey, you're going to really build up some muscles carrying books back and forth. Never really understood what his action of helping meant. 4 years later, Kyle is a popular student, the kids like him, the teachers like him, and he's chosen to give a speech at the graduation. Kyle shared that day, that Friday, when he cleaned out his locker and he took everything home, the reason that he did that is that he didn't want his mom to come back and clean out his locker. Kyle was going to commit suicide that weekend. But one person changed his life, changed his family's life. That act of kindness, even though it wasn't an enemy, it was somebody that he didn't know, that kindness to a stranger changed so much. And so just as a reminder, even those who do not like me could be someone that you don't know. But never, ever underestimate how that simple act or that gesture can change someone's life. So, I know, moving out of that, And so the next item that we're encouraging you to do is to avoid retaliation. Okay? So all of you are reading the Unbelievable book, and in there we're called to love without boundaries. Love wastefully, not calculating the worthiness of that. Don't let that resentment control your actions. Respond with wisdom and grace. Okay? So we live in a very transactional society. Craig and I are from the HR world, and so when you hear retaliation, you're like, oh, now what? Here comes, something. Where's my documentation? What have you done? Where do we go from there? The same thing occurs, is that if we are going to love those who do not like us, that we have to avoid retaliation. Like I said, when I hear that word, I'm just like, oh, please no. But here, loving our enemies or those who do not like us is just not the lack of retaliation. It does not mean that we do not treat them how we treat us. Be good to those who do not like you. So I have a quick quote from Sandra Bullock. So she has said something pretty powerful. She said, "There are moments when the urge to strike back is strong, to return every insult, every act of cruelty. But then I pause. I look deeper. I see their lives, their struggles, and I realize life has already dealt them their share of battles. Not every war needs words. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response. Because in the end, we all give what we carry inside. And I choose not to mirror their hurt. I choose to move forward. Let others be consumed by bitterness. I'll walk with peace. Remember, there is no excuse for not treating people well. We're never excused from this command. There's no, yeah, he did it to me, I'm going to do it to him. We're never justified in treating people poorly. Rise above and avoid retaliation.
The next note is we should seek understanding. Sometimes conflict or perceived conflict, there may not even be a conflict going on, come from misunderstandings. So we need to try to see things from someone else's perspective. You don't know what is happening to any one person at any given moment, like Kyle. You don't know what's going on in someone's life at all. You might be meeting someone for the first time on their very worst day, where everything has gone wrong or they're facing terrible difficulties. Or you might remind them of someone who caused them grievous harm. My husband has a great knack for saying, that person looks like a celebrity. Of course, he can never quite remember the celebrity's name, so it's always that guy from that one movie. But, sometimes just looking at someone reminds you of someone maybe like that did harm you and did cause you some pain in the past. And you don't really know how many people have actually offended you until you try to name your children. Am I right? Oh no, you can't name her that. Charles and Anna went through that with Rose. Unfortunately, I'm glad they picked Rose. It's a beautiful name, but former girlfriends, former boyfriend, all that stuff, you never know. And do you remember a long time ago, I worked as program director at Boy Scout camp, Lewis and Clark, and I had Cindy come down for staff week, and we talked about conflict resolution. So we did an exercise. We talked about how person A says, this is my concern, this is what I think, and you're using I statements. And the other person responds, I understand, and repeat back what they said. So you're understanding, making sure you're clear, because assumptions make out of you and me, so don't do that, don't assume anything. And I had a couple of staffers get up and do the conflict resolution. So one of them was my son, Andrew. And he goes, I said, this is the scenario. Andrew, you and your tent mate, Andrew, you're a Slav. You leave everything out everywhere, and your tent mate, he doesn't like it. He's very tidy. So how do you resolve this conflict? And Andrew's like, okay, so Ian, I know I'm always running late, and so I never have a chance to put anything away, and it's busy all day. I'm sorry about that. I have to take responsibility for that. I'm not sure what I can do. And I said, okay, that's good, Andrew. You said what an issue was, and asked for help. And I said, Ian, how do you respond? Ian slapped him across the face. I'm like, what? And then Cindy had to come and do conflict resolution for us. That is our initial response. When we are harmed or when we're angry, we want to lash out, don't we? But I think if we seek understanding first, if we find out what's really going on with someone, like listen actively. Like sometimes, I love kids, but sometimes some kids are having a rough day. Maybe they didn't get enough sleep. Maybe they need a diaper change. Maybe they're hungry. There could just be so many things going on. But assuming something without finding out more information can cause very, very more problems than anything. So we have to listen actively, but we also have to challenge our perspective. I have a lot of assumptions about Green Bay Packer fans. Missy? Yeah? Anything? Anything? Okay. We went to a Vikings game. It was like one of the end of the year games, and they're playing Green Bay. And Adrian Peterson was going for the record. I mean, this is how long ago it was. And we get to our seats, and oh, good, some Packers fans. Yay! They were awesome. They were amazing people. But you know, you have that initial reaction. I mean, I'm sorry if you're a Packers fan, but Vikings fan. But you know, you have that initial perception, but getting to know people, getting to understand, challenge your perspective. And something else we can do is practice empathy. Sometimes we confuse sympathy and empathy. I like to think that sympathy is you're walking along, you see a big hole, and someone has fallen into the hole. Sympathy is you standing there looking down and saying, oh man, I'm sorry for you. I feel really bad for you, and walking away. But empathy is climbing down in the hole with them and just being there with them. Empathy is more important than sympathy, and sometimes words don't do it. Sometimes it's just holding a hand or smiling or giving a hug. Very powerful thing to do.
The next one, and this is a tough one, is forgive. I already told you that, you know, sometimes I have a tough time not retaliating. I feel like I got like these really tough ones here. Diane definitely owes me a Diet Coke. So forgiveness is very personal. You know, we've seen images here at church before of, cartoons of somebody carrying all their burdens, and how we can, that excess baggage. And the lack of forgiveness is very similar to that excess baggage. For people who don't like me, I have a hard time. I have a hard time rationalizing why they need my forgiveness. So I have to look at it a little bit differently. This week has, once we got this, I was like, piece of cake, I can do this. But once I dug in, I'm kind of like, I have a lot of work to work on my relationships with people who don't like me. If people don't like me, I tend to go into my introvert stage, and I tend to shrink back, and I just take them out of my life. And so that's one of my coping skills. But I've learned, that forgiveness is for me, not necessarily for them. So when I carry any bitterness, that can spill out in how I handle everyday challenges. Once again, I've got like a icky, sad, when we talk about forgiveness. One of the probably best known acts of forgiveness is from October 2nd, 2006, in Nichols Mines, Pennsylvania. On this day, a 32-year-old milk truck driver went into an Amish school. And we know what happened, is that he held the teacher and the schoolgirls hostage, and he eventually shot and killed those children. And what came out of that is that the Amish community immediately gave forgiveness. It wasn't, years later like we've seen in other shootings. It was immediate. Within hours of the shooting, the members of that Amish community reached out to the shooter's family. They offered comfort, and they offered forgiveness. one of the grandfathers said, "We must not think evil of this man. This man just shot and killed your granddaughter." They didn't wait. They didn't wait for an apology. They didn't wait for justification. That forgiveness was offered freely. And it was deeply rooted in the belief that forgiveness is morally imperative. Like I said, they forgave the shooter's family. They set up a charitable fund for his wife or his widow and his children, expressing that these individuals were also victims of the crime. So in a world where we think, an eye for an eye, they have really brought that up front to say our values are nonviolence, humility, and compassion. So healing through forgiveness, so later, they talk about how that helped them grieve or helped them heal. They said that the forgiveness doesn't erase grief or end the pain, but that this radical forgiveness, even in this unimaginable evil, the man that killed their children, the Amish did not condone his actions. They reclaimed their humility, their faith, and peace. I know I've got all the bad ones. I don't have happy examples.
Okay, the next note is we have to set healthy boundaries. Loving enemies doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. You can be compassionate while also protecting yourself. Years ago, I used to be a people pleaser. I used to always try to smooth things over for everyone and always try to not rock the boat and to, just kind of fix every problem. My husband's looking at me like, I've known you over 40 years, married to you for 38. When did this happen? It was before we met, okay? I used to be that way. But it was an unhealthy way to live because I was making myself physically ill, worrying. I would have stomach aches and headaches, and I would be afraid to show any emotion at all. I kept everything inside, and I always tried to not cause any problems. And when my sister had a conflict with my stepfather, I tried to smooth things over very well. And my sister or my brother had a conflict with my mom, I tried to calm the waters as much as I could. But in doing that, I was harming myself. Being on alert 24 hours a day is no way to live, and it's unsettling. When you try to be everything good for everyone, you can actually not do anything good for yourself. I felt I was not worthy of love unless I was perfect. And you know what? No one's perfect, are they? Never. So it's important to set healthy. There's going to be some people who will never like you or who will always find a reason to not like you. That's okay. That's okay. That's their choice. But what I can do is I can reflect on my needs and values and personal comfort levels, and I can act on those. I can communicate my boundaries clearly, especially in a work environment. I can say, you know what, we don't have to be best friends, but we do have to work together. And we have to, this is not, I don't want you to think it's Randy and I in conflict here. I'm thinking like years ago when I was waiting tables, or I worked at a country club, that's something like that. But you also have to be consistent. You have to be consistent with all of these things. If you say, I, need this time to myself, you keep that time to yourself and let people know about it. And recognize and address guilt. Guilt is one of those useless emotions. When I quit being a people pleaser, I quit feeling guilty. It's liberating. Yes, I make mistakes and I will own them, but I can't go back and not make them. I can learn from them and I can move forward. If I do self-care, if I make sure I'm in a healthy place and in a healthy environment, I'm going to be a better person for everyone around me. Everyone benefits from it. So sometimes we think self-care is selfish. It isn't. It's the most generous thing that we can do. We have to remember to, just know what our limits are. Know yourself. Know what you're capable of. And just act on that. And just remember to love.
Our last one is lead by example. So what this one is that we really talk about being the best version of who you are. And so as Diane has talked about setting healthy boundaries, that consistency, knowing who you are, understanding that is how you show up every day and looking at those small moments. Acknowledging that growth isn't about being perfect. It's about being real and accountable and being willing to improve. So one of the examples that I thought about leading by example is Caitlin Clark. So if you don't know, Caitlin Clark is a women's basketball player. Hopefully Brad gets to go see her at the end of the month, but fingers crossed. So when you think about her transition into the WNBA, there's definitely been challenges, visible frustrations, but she has maintained mostly her composure. She has refrained from that criticism, and so again, leading by example about who she is. And she does this not only on the court, but off the court. She's a record-breaking individual, but she also has established the Caitlin Clark Foundation in 2023. This foundation focuses on education, nutrition, and sports to uplift youth and communities. And so her influence, we've heard as now the Caitlin Clark effect. It's increased the WNBA attendance. It's increased the viewership in women's basketball. Little girls are looking up to her and saying, I want to be like her. I heard that WNBA players as a rookie season, they make $70,000 a year. They're not in it for the money. But again, setting that example, so many of our athletes professionally that are well known just don't think about the children that they are doing. So Caitlin is using her professionalism, she's using that platform to advocate for change, how personal excellence, her own, can inspire others. So again, leading that example with grace and using your influence to make yourself can be a powerful role model. So I encourage you all, to be an example, regardless, when you're under pressure. Inspire others and reconsider your assumptions because you don't know what they're going through. And it's not about if somebody notices. It's how you show up each and every day.
So if we're going to love even those who do not like me, we have to remember to pray for them and show kindness and don't retaliate and seek to understand, forgive, and set healthy boundaries and lead by example. That's how we can. I have this great quote by Martin Luther King Jr. He said, man must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such methods is love. It's something we need to remember, love. Love can change everything. Love can change the world. Will you pray with me? Loving and gracious God, it isn't always easy to remember that we are all your children. Help us to see people as you see them, to care for them and to love them as you love us. Always remind us, let us always remember that your love is seen through us and reflected in what we do. It's through your Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen. So, we have come to Communion Sunday. So, talk amongst yourselves for a minute. So that night, Jesus met with his disciples, and he took a loaf of bread.
Sorry, I got too much soap. Sanitizer there.
He took a loaf of bread. He gave thanks and broke bread and passed it to his friends, and he said, "Take, eat this, and when you do, remember me." And the same way, he took a cup of wine. We use a grape here, and he gave thanks and passed the cup and said, "Drink, this is my blood shed for you. And when you do this, remember me." Friends, this is a wonderful day and a great opportunity to remember who we are. Will you pray with me? We're going to say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Table set. Come as you may. Let us pray. Loving God, we thank you for an opportunity to remember you. Help us to remember you every day in all of our actions that we do. I'll invite you to stand and we'll say our New Day Creed together. It's not about me. I give myself freely and totally to God, that I may be used for the building of God's kingdom, for the care of God's world, to love God's children, all of God's children, even those who are not like me, even those who do not like me, that God's kingdom might become real and I might be blessed